Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we're going to be talking about IDP safeties. We're going to talk about top 24 repeaters and more importantly, non top 24 non-repeaters. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hi there, I am your host, Ricky Rodrigue, and you can find me on X at RickyRod66. I'm joined, as I have been on all these top 24 shows, once again by Sean Teague, who you can find at Sean8386. We're thrilled to be here today once again to be talking about the top 24s, repeat and non-repeat, specifically looking at the safety position. Now, this is the fifth of 9 shows that we've been doing. It's the last of the IDP series. If you missed any of the previous series on interior defensive line / defensive tackles, edge / outside linebacker / defensive end, linebackers, cornerbacks, you can go back and watch those on this very same YouTube channel of IDP Plus. And we hope that will get you thinking and learning a lot as well as part of that process. So we're going to go ahead and begin. And as we've been doing for every one of these shows, we're going to start off by looking at the repeat rates based on a 10-year average at each of the positions. And since we're focusing on safety, we're going to talk about safety here. And as you can see on the chart for those that are looking, but if you're listening, I will talk about it. In general, over the last 10 years, on average, only 3 of the top 12 safeties have repeated, which was right in line with the cornerbacks we talked about last year, where only 3 of the top 12 cornerbacks repeated. Safeties have a slightly better repeat rate in top 24 than cornerbacks, where 10 of the top 24 safeties repeated year over year. So that's once again over a 10-year average. So it's not like it's a 1-year outlier or anything along those lines. We're talking about a 10-year average that has proven true, particularly as we've been looking at the King Classic scoring system and all. So, Sean, when we were preparing for the safety show, you've been looking at the King's Classic scoring system and looking at the first 3 years of that event. And I'll pull up that scoring system and I'll ask you, as you were digging into the history of the King's Classic scoring system and the repeaters, did you learn anything of interest of safeties? Because for each of these positions, you've learned a lot of good information.
Yeah, when it comes to the top 12 repeaters, from 22 to 23, there were only 2. And then from 23 to 24, there was actually 5. And that average is pretty close to what this
That's
10
7,
years.
that's 3.5, correct? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's most of these have been right there with that 10-year study of that average. What I found really fascinating is that there was only 2 that repeated the top 12 all 3 years, and I'm sure everybody thinks Derwin James, and they'd be right on that one. And the other one was actually Julian Love. I found that one a bit surprising. He's kind of forgotten. He's not looked at as one of the top guys overall, and he actually outscored Derwin James all 3 years too. So even more surprising there.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners and / watchers would be very surprised by that, as am I. And once again, you can look at the scoring system online, or you can see it in the graphic while Sean's talking here. Sorry, Sean. Now, Sean, one of the things you did talk about last week when it came to cornerbacks was you talked about rookies and second-year players, and how surprisingly there was a good number of cornerbacks, rookies in second years, breaking to the top 24. Did the same apply to safeties?
Not so much. In 2022, there were 2 rookies. That would be Jalen Petrie and Jaquan Brisker were the only 2 to crack the top 24. And then in 23, it was Brian Branch. And last year, there were actually no rookies. And I believe Brian Branch was the only second-year guy last year. I mean, it seems to be a big contrast from the corners, whereas rookies and secondary guys took up about a third of the top 24. This year is it's quite the opposite. We're only looking at a couple guys each year, so very interesting there.
Very interesting indeed. And it'll be interesting when we start sharing with our listening audience here slash watching audience who we took out of the top 24 and who we added into the top 24 as a result. But before we go ahead and do that, and pull up the who was in the top 24 last year, I do want to do a plug for the Fast Draft app. You get a first time deposit of up to $50 match if you use the code word plus, PLUS. So if you put in 25, they'll match 25. If you put in 50, they'll match 50. If you put in 75, you'll get 50. Okay? So it's up to $50. Use the code plus. Go check out the Fast Draft app. One of the things I love about it in particular is that it does have IDPs for you IDPers in particular. Go check it out. Some great contests there, not only just IDP but offense. And it is a quote fast draft. It goes by fast. So take advantage of that $50 deposit. All right, with that, let's go ahead and pull up the top 24 from last year. And a lot of names that you would expect on this chart, Sean, but then some names that maybe you didn't expect. When you think about some of the names you didn't expect on this list before I kind of summarized it. Now, was there a name or two that caught you by surprise on this list?
Yeah, Xavier Woods was one I wasn't expecting, especially to be 12th. Uh, that one caught me off guard because he's kind of always been a quiet guy who just racks up tackles, a few big plays every now and then, but generally he's not looked at as a top 24 guy. And then with all the struggles in Tennessee, Monty Hooker snuck on here too. So that was, I don't guess it's too surprising with as bad as that defense was, that team in general, but still, it didn't feel like he had that great of a season. So those were the two that jumped out the most to me. How about you?
Xavier Woods was the one in particular that absolutely hit me. Now, Deshaun Elliott, he has historically missed a bunch of games,
Mm-hmm.
and so last year he missed a couple of games as well. But his tackle floor was so high with Pittsburgh deploying Minka Fitzpatrick deep, which was one of the reasons he's not on the list because Pittsburgh really changed his utilization, moving him deep and moving Elliott to the box. So even though Elliott missed a couple of games, very high in tackles per snap, very efficient from that regard. So seeing him on the list initially was surprising, but then when I dug into it, wasn't quite as surprising as well. Okay,
And
but
that
I
kind of
bet
goes
you.
in line
Oh,
with their usage at linebacker, where we never see a linebacker really crack the top 24 in Pittsburgh. So that means there's more tackle opportunities for corners, safeties, and all that. So that does kind of follow.
and Patrick Queen didn't necessarily change that tradition last year in terms of being a huge tackler from that linebacker position. Although, if I remember correctly, he did barely crack the top 24. All right. So our audience is probably wondering, okay, this is going to be a tough list to take 14 people out of because, once again, the whole idea behind this exercise, everybody, is the 10-year average, and then using once again the King's Classic as well as another example. The numbers are pan out year over year that on average, 14 people are going to fall out of the safety position. So the challenge Sean and I have had, and we've trying to do for you all and to get you all thinking, you may agree, you may disagree, that's fine. You'll let us know in the YouTube comments as many people have been doing. But it's which 14 come on off the list and what 14 going to come on the list. So that is what we're trying to do. And once again, I do it every week. I'm going to quote it one more time. The great Bob Harris, the football diehard, always says we're trying to draft this year's best team, not last year's best team. So if 14 of the 24 fall off on average, if we try and draft based on last year's stats and results, we're not going to draft this year's best team. So let's take a look, Sean, at who you and I both knocked off the list. And for those that are able to watch, and for those that might be listening, we'll look at the list later. because we won't read all 24 names, but you could see in red the ones where Sean and I agreed that both of us took off the list and said, we don't think these are going to repeat in the top 24. And there was 9 of the 14 that we agreed upon. There are 5 others. The 5 that are in purple are the ones that Ricky felt that were not going to make the list again this coming year. And the ones in blue are the ones that Sean felt that were not going to repeat in the top 24. So 9 we agreed upon, 5 we didn't, and we've both have some good arguments, I'm sure, for our decisions and all. And we're going to talk about a few of those. But before we talk about some of our differences, we want to talk about one of our similarities. And one of those is Nick Cross, who was number 2 last year. But Sean, both you and I both took him off the list. So you want to kind of share with the audience kind of some of your thinking about why you took him off the list?
Yeah, it just felt like that's his ceiling for me. I don't see him hitting those crazy tackle numbers again. I think it was 147 tackles. I don't recall a whole lot of big plays in there either. And we're getting a whole new defense, new defensive coordinator in Lou Ronaramu, or however his name is.
I think it's Lou Aramaru.
Yeah. I don't Ronaramu. Yeah. So between the new scheme and everything, and I really don't see the defense being on the field for another 1,150 snaps, 1,200 snaps again this year either. We'll be getting some guys back healthy, maybe an upgraded linebacker too, and then some extra help in safety with Cam Bynum coming in. I just don't think the tackles are going to be there. Plus, they upgraded Charvarius Ward at corner, joining Kenny Moore as well. So I just don't see it happening again. I'm not saying he won't produce. I just don't see him hitting the top 24.
Yeah, and the system was the main reason that the system change is the main reason that I left him off as well. You go from the Gus Bradley system that had, you know, primarily a deep safety, which Julian Blackmon ended up playing because Nick Cross struggled at that deep safety position. If you go back to the preseason and look at all the preseason stories last year, they really wanted Blackmon to play the Cross role and Cross to play the Blackmon role. And they just couldn't trust Cross deep. And so they put him closer to the box. And he did make a bunch of tackles from that regard. However, the system that Anarumo Shamalama, I don't know if that Greece thing just popped into my head there. But now I completely lost my train of thought. But anyway, if you look at what happened with the Bengals safeties last year, you just didn't see the production. You don't see any of those in the top 24. And part of it was, is it the quality of the players back there? Von Bell was back there. He was aging out. Jordan Battle didn't really step up. Geno Stone was back there. He cracked the list, but more because he got some big play interceptions and not necessarily because of this tackle floor and so forth. So if that's the system they're moving to, that's a big change for Cross. Huge impact to his tackling, positioning, and as a result of that, I took him off the list as well.
I want to add one more thing to that. He, I believe, originally started last year as the deep safety, and I read where Julian Blackmon early in the year, he was getting the big tackle numbers up in the box and everything. He actually sustained some injury, which he played through, and that was one reason they moved him deep and moved Cross up as well. So
very interesting. We go deep, folks, and that's another great deep tidbit from Sean there in terms of what happened last year and some of the implications into this year. All righty, but Sean, so one of the folks that you left on the list that I'm taking off is Xavier McKinney. So why don't you talk about why you left Xavier McKinney on the list?
Yeah, I really like his tackle floor. On the 2 years that he has pretty much played a full season, he has produced the tackles. We've seen multiple years where he had at least 5 interceptions. And I understand why you took him off because he had, 8 last year? I'm not expecting that again. The eight is a fantastic season, especially for a safety. I like his usage in this defense. I still think he can knock out another 4 to 6 interceptions, hit another 80 to 100 tackles, throw in a fumble recovery or something like that, and it just puts him right back in the top 24. So seeing the history of him produce this well before and in a different scheme and on a different team makes me think that it's the player and not just the scheme.
So the reason I took him off is I looked at, in the audiences, if you've been listening to a lot of our shows, I do like the tackles per snap
Mm-hmm.
stat that I calculate. And at the safety position, McKinney finished 49th in tackles per snap. And so, and a lot of his points, particularly in this scoring system, got jacked up, and moving him into the top 12 was driven by the interceptions that you called out, Sean.
Sure.
And I'm just not a big believer in year-over-year repeat rates on interceptions. So, it's just sort of like touchdowns. When a wide receiver has more than an average of one every 10 catches, it feels like more of a fluke, and it is going to be, and it tends to regress. And we'll talk about some of that more from a wide receiver's perspective when we talk about the Terry McLaurins of the world. But similarly on interceptions, you go back in time, Deron Bland, look at year over year. If you go back to Trevon Diggs and all, you see these interceptions, see these peak years, and then the drop off. So that was my logic and rationale on Xavier McKinney.
Yeah, and I completely get it. A lot of these guys, this is actually a little tougher, just trying to hold on to less here than we have on these other positions. So trying to find who, and I flip flopped McKinney on. I took him off. I put him back just as I dug some more on some of these other guys. But one guy I had no problem kicking off was Brandon Jones. Tell us a little more why you left him on.
Yep. So that's a great call out, Sean. And so on Brandon Jones, for those that listened to the cornerback discussion last week, we talked a lot about Jahdae Barron and why we have him into the top 24 and what we think he does to Riley Moss and to Jaquan McMillan. Now, Sean's narrative or assumptions, I like to use the term narratives because that's really what we're trying to figure out, is narratives about what might happen, on these teams and so forth. And Sean's narrative was that Barron would also have an impact to the safeties, including Brandon Jones. My narrative is different from that, in that he might get a few snaps at safety, but I feel like it's really Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan that's going to be impacted, that Brandon Jones and Hufanga are going to stay primarily on the field, leaving Brandon Jones well positioned to stay in the top 24. So I think that's the biggest difference in terms of our thought process. But Sean, anything you'd add to that?
Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw being back and playing in front of him, I feel there will be less tackle opportunities to come his way, because I see these guys as athletically quick and are just they have a nose for the football, so that they're going to be there at the tacklers, and I just don't see the numbers coming. Plus, watching his struggles in the past in Miami, some with injury and some with just I don't know, playing out of position sometimes, getting in his own head or whatever. Uh, he's always making me nervous. So, and for him to only get like 79 tackles in a season and then jump up to 115, I'm going to have to see it again before I trust Brendan Jones.
Particularly as high as number 4.
For
So
sure.
the one reason you hit on, the one reason that I considered taking him off the list, and it wasn't because of Barron, it was because of his injury history.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, he avoided that this year. And to your point, that's what allowed him to stay on the field and have over 100 tackles this past year. So that'll be the real key in my mind, is if you think he's going to stay healthy, I think he stays in top 24. So, but anyway, so that's our Brandon Jones debate. We have another one. Sean shared an interesting stat early in the show. If you kind of jumped around and missed it, I'll ask him to repeat it here on Julian Love. And so I took him off the list. Sean left him on. Sean, what's your argument for leaving Julian Love? And it might go back to that stat you quoted earlier.
Yeah, for the last 3 years, he's one of 2 safeties to repeat in the top 12 all 3 years, and he was the highest ranking one each year. Julian Love, I mean, he's overlooked each year. He's getting 120 tackles, 120 tackles, 109 tackles last year. And that's on two different teams. That's playing with the Giants. That's coming over to Seattle 2 years. And moving in different safety positions there as well. Different schemes, different parts of the country, complete opposite coast. I mean, it's everything I want to see in a player uh, that shows the consistency I want. And he's I could draft him later than a lot of these guys. I mean, he's outscoring Derwin James the last 3 years, and Derwin James is going to be one of the top 2 to 3 guys drafted, and I can get Julian Love as probably the 12th guy. So his value is fantastic, and man, there's not much more. Their strength of schedule is great also. So it's good. Everything's good in front of him. The linebacker situation is interesting as well. They only really deployed one full-time linebacker for the most part, and then like Tyrese Knight, I think played around this. I want to say 70 range. It could be higher than
Yeah,
that.
he was around 75%. Yeah, that is correct.
So that's another thing that they like to use 3 safety sets, and I mean he's locked in. He's the top dog there, and I'm not dropping him until he drops himself off this list.
Well, repeating in the top 24, that might be another study we need to talk about in the future in terms of repeat rates, how many years in a row kind of thing.
That's a good question.
Is there a fall off with age and time and so forth? And, does Lady Luck catch up with them? I haven't done that study yet. So you're right in terms of Seattle's linebacker usage. You had, particularly at the end of the year, you had Jones playing in the middle, getting about 100% of the snaps. You had Tyrese Knight playing about 75% of the snaps. And then Rayshawn Jenkins was the third safety / third linebacker playing about 50% of the snaps kind of thing. And this is where Nick Imanwori, who we're going to talk about coming up, and it might end up stealing some of that thunder here when we get to the next slide for moving into the top 24. But I actually envision the following happening. I actually envision that Imanwori will actually leapfrog Kobe Bryant and move into the starting lineup. It might take a few games before that happens, but you have Imanwori and Love as your starters, which would probably end up positioning Imanwori a little bit more into the box as opposed to Love, which would take away some of Love's tackles. And then when they do go to that third safety system and Kobe Bryant does come back on the field, Imanwori is the one that moves into the box in that old Rayshawn Jenkins role. So once again, and I think he'll clean up a little bit better than Rayshawn Jenkins did, along with having Ernest Jones for a full season there as well in front of him. So that is my logic for pulling Love off the list. My gut tells me when you have a repeat rate of only 10 of the top 24 3 years in a row, if Love has been in there 3 years in a row, there's something about some sort of negative regression that's due as well. And so the math part of me says, even though I haven't done the study, that he's due for a fall off. So that's Ricky's argument on Julian Love.
Yeah, I get it. It's not a terrible one. That is some good questions there, and he's still in his prime too. He's only 27, so that's another reason for me to hang on in there. He's not an old guy just yet. Another guy I had a hard time with keeping on this list. I had him on there and I took him back off after looking at some of the upgrades that the Browns have made on defense, both up front on the line and at linebacker. I ended up taking Grant Delpit off just because I do think there will be less tackles opportunities coming his way. And you left him on.
I did, and it was a function of a couple of things. One is he has a high tackle floor. Mm-hmm. On my tackles per snap calculations, he finished 9th among safeties. Now, he hasn't been getting some of the big plays, and I think that's because of how Schwartz is using him.
Yeah.
But I think that floor will end up keeping him in the top 24. Part one. Part two, I think the Browns are going to stink. Okay, when it's all said and done.
It's a very fair bet.
I think their offense will probably end up having 3 different quarterbacks start during the year. Now, which ones and for how many games, I'm not sure. Okay, but I think 3 end up starting this year. And with all that churn on the offense and them struggling, I think the defense is going to be on the field a lot. You talked about the Colts in terms of the number of defensive plays they had last year. I think the Browns will be on the defense in terms of total snaps, probably in the top 5 again. When teams running out the clock late in the game against the Browns, I think that'll create a few extra opportunities here and there. But I think it's that tackle floor in particular that keeps Delpit in the top 24. It has nothing to do with my LSU bias as a side note. It is strictly based on the numbers and that Browns team.
Unbiased. I love to hear it. I agree with his tackle floor. It's the lack of the big plays and the blitzing and sacks and stuff like that that kind of pushes him to the bottom of that top 24. So it does make him kind of a fringe player, I guess you could
Agree
say,
with
as
that.
to will he sneak in or not. So if he can get some big plays in there, that would definitely keep him on the top 24. But with the upgrade at linebacker, are any concerns there?
So I don't know if I'd call it upgrade. You lose JOK, you put in Schlesinger. He's a rookie, so I'm not sure if that's quite an upgrade. Although I think we both agree Schlesinger sneaks into the top 24. Jordan
Yeah.
Hicks, 32, injury prone. Jerome Baker, there's not much there. I'll be surprised if he even makes the team, quite frankly. I think they'll keep the younger guy, Diabate, and even Winston Reed over Baker when all is said and done. Devin Bush having a potential legal issue as well, and I'll put that in quotes, and I did use the term potential. So with all that being said, I'm not really that stoked about the linebacker core for the Browns either. It'll be really interesting if Jim Schwartz realizes finally what a diamond he has in Delpit, and does he end up trying to blitz him more? Does he move him more into the box? They did sign, let's see who they signed. They signed Casey and Jenkins, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I believe those are
Jenkins
the two.
was
And then
added
they,
up a little late. Yeah.
yeah, and then they brought in Hickman. Not that those guys are studs by any stretch of the imagination, but if do they do a little bit more 3 safety and let Delpit cheat up as more of the third linebacker potentially, and then maybe a little bit more blitzing. Can't rely on that. That's more maybe a little bit wishful on my part, but as seeing him, what he was capable of at LSU when he did early in his career in Cleveland, I'm just surprised Schwartz hasn't used him as more of a weapon from that regard. Alrighty, so now one of the ones that, boy, this is another one that I went back and forth on. I actually ended up taking him off the list, but you put him on, or left him on, excuse me, and that is Jeremy Chin, who moved from the Commanders to the Raiders in the offseason as a free agent.
Yeah, and Washington really turned him loose and let him shine. He tied career high with 117 tackles. He had some sacks. He had the tackles for a loss. He's not much of a interception guy, so he needs the high tackles and behind the line plays and stuff like that. And now he's going to Vegas, where the Raiders have probably one of the most questionable linebacking groups in the league. So that excites me. Can't fully count on those guys to eat all the tackles up. Done a little more digging on Patrick Graham's defense here, and for the years he's been defensive coordinators, he's turned out some real gem seasons for safeties, and that's Eric Rowe, Logan Ryan, Jabril Peppers, and even Deron Harmon with the Raiders, Trayvon Merrick, Isaiah Polamalu. I've all had really good seasons under Patrick Graham's defense, and I really see no reason Jeremy Chan can't throw up another 100 and some tackles, throw in a couple sacks and all that too again this year. It's right in line with everything I looked at from his days in Patrick Graham calling shots in Miami, New York, and here in Vegas.
Yeah. So if you look at the person he's replacing on this list, Chin's at number 14, and there's Morig at number 13.
Yeah.
So on the one
It's
hand, it feels like it's an easy argument to say he's going to take Morig's place. Morig in the Graham system, though, finished 23rd in tackles per snap. Now, in the Washington Commanders, Chin was, it looks like about 10th on my list here. I should have put numbers next to him, but he was about 10th in tackles per snap. So it feels like despite Graham's system, there's a little bit of a pullback potentially in opportunities for tackles per snap. Chin had the great rookie year, then he disappeared for a few years, did okay his last year in Carolina before he became a free agent in Washington. And he had some big games in Washington, but he also had he had a great streak in the middle of the year, but then he also started disappearing
Yeah.
several games late in the year as well. And it was that inconsistency that ultimately led to me taking him off the list. So that is the one thing that I'm concerned about with him.
Yeah, I get it. Totally get it. I had some of the same concerns as well with the inconsistencies, especially this past year. Years in Carolina, they were swapping around coaches, trying different schemes, and it just became an absolute mess there. So seeing his potential again, and not just as a 1 year wonder rookie or something, uh, gives me a lot of hope that in the right hands, which I think Patrick Graham is the right guy for a guy like Jeremy Chin. Yeah, he should be right there in the top. I'm gonna say 10.
All righty. So one more that we want to talk about off of this list before we go into who we're going to move into the top 24.
And
And that one
I,
is Kirby Joseph.
oh man, I
And
I hated taking him off this list. I really did. It's I'll tell you why I did it because his tackle floor is one of the best. He's routinely
oh,
80 tackles a year, 4 interceptions. Blew up last year with 9, and but he had to hit that 9 to actually make it far on this list. Otherwise, he's just off of it. But you left him on.
I left him off because of the tackles themselves. So in this scoring system, the interceptions and all the big plays really contributed, which includes interception return yards and so forth, really helped Kirby Joseph get up this list. In terms of tackles per snap, if you were going to guess, Sean, and I didn't tell you this before the show, so in terms of total safeties, where do you think he finished in tackles per snap?
Oh boy, I'm going to imagine it's low if you took him off. I'm going to say it's 50.
Very close. 56 is where he
Okay.
finished. And so that tackles per snap being so low, plus Detroit getting a lot healthier on defense, a lot
Mhm.
healthier up front, a lot healthier at the linebacker position, leads me to believe there'll be even less tackle opportunities for him back in that deep safety position that he was playing under Aaron Glenn. Plus, on top of that, there is a new defensive system there, new defensive coordinator. Don't know what kind of implications that could happen. You expect it to be roughly the same. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it is a new coordinator. He may call things differently. As a result of that, what does that mean for Joseph in those big play opportunities as well with that low tackle floor? So that's why I pulled Kirby Joseph off. In one of my favorite leagues, the Diehards Dynasty League, um, late in the season as it was getting near the trade deadline and right before the playoff push, I actually traded Kirby Joseph in the fourth for Budda Baker. And the scoring was roughly equal, whatever,
Mhm.
but I wanted that tackle floor that Budda gave me. And so that's why I made that move. And of
Nice.
course, Budda was number one on this list. So even then, even in a dynasty league, I just because of that low tackle floor, even during the season last year, I was ready to give up on him because I just really felt the upside wasn't going to be there from a top 24 perspective. All righty. With that now, though, people probably wondering, wow, okay, 14 people off the list, including, Cam Bynum, Donovan Wilson, Shamari Connor, Geno Stone, and Money Hooker, Quinny Lake, and there's more. Okay. People are going to want to know, well, what 14 people did y'all add to the list? Well, I'm going to show you that in a second, but first I got to make a quick shout out for IDP Plus. Go to idpplus.com. You'll get great tools, great rankings, great articles. You have the Discord support from the team. There's not a lot of great IDP sites out there that have a lot of experts in IDP that are out there ready to support you all, and they do that through the Discord channel. And by the way, they're great in offense as well. So um, you'll get the help you need on both sides of the ball. Whether you're new to IDP or veteran, you just want to bounce some things around. It could be a start sit question. You'll be able to take advantage of the Discord. But they have some fantastic tools as well A lot of the great stats and data that Sean and I use as part of this come from those tools on our website. So go to IDP Plus, check it out. You can try it for 1 month if you want, or annual subscription, etc. So anyway, try it out. Okay, with that, let's move on and let's reveal who we think is going to be added to the top 24. So with 14 people coming off, that means we both had to come up with 14 coming on. Interestingly enough, if I was guessing before our list came together, I would have thought we would have been about 7 that would have matched on, but we actually matched on 9 with one surprising name in particular that we agreed upon. And we'll talk about him coming up shortly here. So, Sean, I'm going to go ahead and the number one on both of our list, who had some injury issues last year, but one of our readers on YouTube, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, I believe it's Mangizi or whatever, talked about, well, if we don't have Antoine Winfield added to our list of top 24, we basically don't know what we're doing, but we both added him in. So shout out to the reader that put that on YouTube. And Sean, let's talk about Antoine Winfield and why you have him here in the top 24.
Yeah, he was my top safety going into last year overall, and played 9 games, which is basically half a season, a little over. And if you look at his production, 60 tackles, 2 sacks, lost it.
Yeah, but if you just roughly double those two, yeah,
it puts him right on pace where he was the year before. So he's got the tackles, he's got the big plays, he gets the sacks, the interceptions. That's everything I want. He does it all. They move him all over the field. He's still one of the top safety in Dynasty, I'd say. Well, top 2. I'll go top 2. Maybe another young guy took his spot, but yeah, he's phenomenal. If not for the injury, we wouldn't have to put him on this list.
Right, that's exactly right. He would have been staying on he would have been on the previous list and would have stayed there. So, any concerns about him being on the smaller side and then him being injured and the way he plays recklessly? And do you think that, obviously, you don't think it's going to catch up with him this year because he left him on the list, but any kind of concerns for the longer term on Winfield?
I do have some concerns because this isn't, last year wasn't the first time he's missed some games. In fact, he's had 2 seasons of only playing 13. So I do think his size is against him a little bit. But the way he plays, the fearlessness and the willingness to hunt down tackles reminds me a lot of his father when he played. Same grit and everything. And I love that. So he might get in his own way eventually. But for now, he's still in his prime, 26, 27. For the next couple of years anyway, I'm sticking with him.
That's interesting. I'm sticking with him for this year, but if he's having a fantastic year and I've got him on a dynasty roster,
sell high.
I would. I think I'd be selling high late in the year if I'm not in the playoff contention or whatever on that dynasty team. I
have zero problem with ever selling a safety. If I said when Jalen Petrie had his rookie season, I told everybody to sell high then because those were really high tackle numbers for a safety. They were bringing in a whole new scheme, a whole new coach and everything. Sell high. So, yeah, anytime you can get good value for a safety, pretty much any safety, do it. Do it.
Well, you brought up a name, and we're going to probably go out of order from what we planned from a script perspective. But the other thing I just wanted to mention is Tyke Smith here. Mm-hmm. And I added him to the list as well because I really think he's going to take on that Jordan Whitehead role, which was fairly productive for tackles and all. And I think Tyke Smith is going to be a much better player than Jordan Whitehead. And so I think the Tampa Bay Bucs will actually have 2 safeties in the top 24, particularly with some of the concerns in that inside linebacker world that they have with Levante David being 35. We both said he wouldn't repeat in the top 24. And next to him, you're either talking about Anthony Walker, who is 30 going on 31 and injury prone.
Very injury prone.
Injury prone, or Servasi Dennis, who probably is a little bit better maybe in pass coverage than he was in run support. And that's why there's a period of time they were platooning him and KJ Britt before some of the injuries with those two. So I have this feeling that the safeties are going to have to play more of a role, and I think Smith and Winfield will both crack the top 24.
And I don't hate that. I just had a little concerns of how much would Smith be used at safety, nickel, box. I'm a little concerned about where he's going to be, plus with some of the draft picks they've made, where everybody's going to line up. So if it becomes a scenario where Winfield's down in the box all the time, is Smith back deep? I don't know. Or do they just split the field 50-50 and not really have a strong and a free? There's a lot of options there. Yeah, it's Taki Smith is a very exciting name to go with too.
So you bring up a good point. So right now it is June 17th as we're recording this for everyone to
Yeah,
to know, and most of the mini camps are completed. There's about four left going on this week, but training camps coming up, and so while this is June 17th, so to Sean's point, one of the things we'll be want to be watching, and we'll be there watching with you, and we'll have some shows covering some of the things that we're learning and seeing as we get into training camp. But how is what is some of the deployment? Is Tyke Smith going to stay as a slot corner? Does he get moved to safety? We'll be covering a lot of those things with you all. But you brought up Jalen Petrie and talked about selling him high after that first year when he had all those tackles and so forth. You have him moving back into the top 24. I have somebody different from the same team, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So state your case for Mr. Petrie moving back into the top 24, Sean.
he is slotted as the nickel on this defense. He got the extension. They've pretty much come out and said it's still his job, and Gardner Johnson will actually be the strong safety. We've seen him produce numbers that were very well again by making that switch to the nickel position, where he kind of fell off from the safety once they switched to D'Amico Ryans and his new defensive scheme. But he was really hitting a stride. He was doing well up until he got injured last year. So for him to come back and to already be guaranteed that spot, I think it's a good buy low for him right now.
Interesting. Okay. So from the Texans' perspective, of course, they traded with the Eagles to acquire Gardner Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And with obviously, I think it was a fourth rounder they gave up for him. So clearly with plans to move him into the starting lineup.
Sure.
And with the thing with Houston is they drafted Kalen Bullock last year, who had, as the season progressed, got more and more playing time, and he plays more that free safety role and covers a lot of ground, which allowed the Eric Murrays of the world, for example, to play the other safety spot and not do so bad last year. He parlayed that into 3 years and $21 million with Jacksonville, which holy cow, what were they thinking on a 30-plus-year-old safety? If a lot of these GMs actually played fantasy football and really looked at some of the stats and ages and all, and as we look at things and see things, they can learn a heck of a lot. I digress. But anyway, so Petrie, I do see him playing the slot, but I don't. But as a result, though, that means 75-80% of the snaps as a safety.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gardner Johnson gets 100% of the snaps roughly, and that was my rationale for playing Gardner Johnson over Petrie. I do worry a little bit about Petrie's injury as well because he hasn't been able to stay healthy since that first season. So once again, different narratives, both could play out. But so that's where, Sean and I have different thoughts to share with you all to kind of process and get y'all takes. Sean, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I sat there and thought about putting both Gardner Johnson and Petrie on this list because I do expect a little more tackle opportunities, especially with the way that linebacker core is in front of them. It's just a mess. And I could see both of them actually getting close to the top 24, if not being on that cusp, one side or the other. Yeah, both of them. So no, I don't hate that pick at all.
All right. Well, another one where we both added someone into the top 24, but from the same team, that is, was with the Washington Commanders. And of course, as we talked about earlier, Jeremy Chin has moved on. You added Quan Martin in moving into the top 24, which I actually considered, but then I said, okay, well, who's going to play that old Jeremy Chin role? And I don't think they're going to move Barton out of his role. So I cheated a little bit and I put Percy Butler / Tyler Owens, not Will Harris. So why don't you talk a little bit about Quan Martin first there, Sean, and then I'll talk about my side of the ledger.
Sure. I think what we're both trying to say is we really like the position for somebody.
Exactly
We
right.
just don't know exactly who that somebody is going to be. I went with Quan Martin. He's got a little more time in the system there. He had 87 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, interception last year. Um, he did all that with 2 separated shoulders. Played the entire season, which shows a lot of toughness. So Dan Quinn has really been speaking up his toughness and his willingness to play injured. And then practices have been going on, and he didn't do so well right out the gate, and got kind of demoted to the second team defense. And then after some really strong practices, he has worked his way back up onto that starting defense in practice, and has really been getting a lot of praise from Joe Witt. So he seems to be getting the coaches backing him. He's shown toughness. 87 tackles, that's a pretty good floor if he can keep that up. And honestly, I really don't know who's going to play where in this defense. I just think with his familiarity there that he does have a leg up on, say, Will Harris and Owens. Butler, I really don't know where he's going to end up either. So it just felt like Quan Martin was the right guy. A little bit of a gut call there, too. But yeah, Ricky, let's hear your
So
cheating pick here.
yes, exactly. So to your point, we both agreed with Jeremy Chin moving on. Whoever takes that Chin role should finish in the top 24. So we're aligned on that 100%.
For sure.
I don't think Quan Martin moves into that role. I think Quan Martin stays in the same role that he was in, which he didn't finish in the top 24. Even with some slight improvement, I don't think that'll get him all the way to the top 24. When Chin left for the Raiders, the Commanders went very cheap
Mm-hmm.
and signed Will Harris from the Saints. Now, remember, the Saints sucked last year, okay, and part of their problem was tackling, okay, and I should have looked up Will Harris' tackling stats, in terms of his missed tackle percentage, and I didn't, so my apologies to the audience here. But I watched enough of the Saints, who are my favorite team for those that aren't aware, that might be new to listen to us. And he struggled, and the Saints gave up a lot of long runs, a lot of long pass plays because of just poor tackling in the secondary. So Harris is a much cheaper and not nearly as good. Remember, the Detroit Lions released him. He was a free agent on the streets for quite a while before the Saints actually signed him and picked him up, and then he eventually moved into the starting lineup. So I have zero confidence in Will Harris, is what I'm telling you. And if I believe Quan Martin is going to stay in his role and Will Harris is just not that good, then I look at the depth chart. Percy Butler, who's going, I believe, into his 4th year now at Washington, granted his 2nd year in the system, has shown a little bit of improvement year over year. Then there's a chance that Percy Butler surprises and moves into that role instead of Will Harris. The other wild card is the undrafted free agent Tyler Owens, who they really liked last year, kept on the team and so forth. And now maybe he's the one that surprises. But I purposely did the slash for the point that we talked about is it's more that role, less the player. And it's whichever player ends up in that role is going to be positioned to do well and to crack into the top 24. Maybe not into the top 12, but probably somewhere in that top 24.
Yeah, that's dead on. It's the role we like. I also do not feel like Will Harris is or will be the answer there. I see him getting benched pretty quick if he makes it that far. I really expect somebody to beat him out before the season starts, and him just to kind of be a safety net of sorts. Looking at his missed tackle rate, it was a 10.8 last year and a 14.3 the year before, which is not good.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, I was
That's
being
really
nice.
bad.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not good at all.
Thanks for looking that up while I was talking there. And so now, moving on now, same division with the Dallas Cowboys. I thought I was being Mr. Smart Guy by putting this guy in the list. And then I get your list and you've got him on as well. And we both took off his predecessor. So we both took Donovan Wilson out of the top 24. We both put Wanye Thomas into the top 24, the former Georgia Tech safety. Sean, why don't you talk to the audience here about why you have Wanye Thomas on the list?
Yeah. So Jordan Lewis is gone, and Wanye
Who was their
Thomas
slot nickel cornerback
slot
type?
the nickel spot. Yep. He's pretty much guaranteed that spot if they don't cut Donovan Wilson, which has been speculated and talked about. Donovan Wilson is 30, so he is getting up on that higher end for any NFL position. And there's been rumblings of Marquise Bell maybe taking Wilson's spot and Thomas staying in that nickel spot. Either way, I'm pretty sure Donovan Wilson is out at some point. And when Wanye Thomas was in last year for a brief moment or two, he looked really good. He was doing well there. I think it's his year. I just kind of have that feeling. Kenneth Murray playing there doesn't scare me for competition in tackles either. So if he is playing near the line, whether it be at nickel or box safety or whatever it may be, I'm pretty confident he's going to rack up some tackles here. And he has a lot of confidence. He's pretty much said he could play corner if they want him to as well. And I think they have played around with some of that as well, with uncertainty there between injuries and just inexperience. So they're talking like they're going to start moving this guy around, almost that star kind of position that we've talked about in the past. That it gives me a lot of confidence.
In OTAs and mini camps, now granted, they're running around in shorts and t-shirts. Okay, got
Sure.
it. But they are using him all over the place, and they are really playing him up. And if we go back a couple of years, just 2 years ago, there was Jaron Curse and Donovan Wilson on the field. Jaron Curse became a free agent, and he was just suddenly gone.
Disappeared. Yep.
And then, the a little bit different in that Donovan Wilson's not a free agent, but with some of the, trying to land this Micah Parsons contract that if they would have signed him when they should have, they could have probably gotten him for about $30 million a year. Now it's going to cost them about $43-44 million a year. There's going to be some salary cap challenges. A 30-year-old safety, when you've got some young safeties behind him, creates the opportunity for bye-bye Donovan Wilson and hello Wanye Thomas. So we were both aligned and added him to the list, and definitely someone that once we get into minicamp, we'll be watching for the reports on Donovan Wilson and Wanye and that whole Cowboy secondary, but someone definitely we want everybody to have on their radars. And so another name that we both put on the list is Nick Imanwari, who's a rookie. And earlier in the show, you talked about the fact how there were 0 rookies that made the top 24 this past year and only 2 previous year, but yet we both put him on the list. So why don't you tell everybody, though, why even with those low numbers, we put Imanwari on the list? And we did cheat a little bit, talk about him earlier.
Yeah, he was one of the top safeties in the drafts. I don't know how your rankings were with rookies, but I liked Emanwari over Starks just because I felt he was a more traditional box safety type guy and not the deep guy, which puts you in line for tackles. Going back to Seattle, Mike McDonald really wants to play the big nickel, which is 3 safeties. In other words, somebody's going to come in and kind of play that linebacker role, not quite the nickel slot because that's Devin Witherspoon's. But there's another side of the field there too. So that side. And here in the OTAs, they have moved him at both safety positions. They have moved him up at linebacker. They've put him in the slot. They plan on using this guy everywhere. They're raving about him, which again, OTAs, you want to talk guys up. But from what I'm seeing from beat writers and everything, he's looking the part. So maybe he's kind of in a slot or up in the box. And when there's Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight there. Tyrese Knight comes off the field, then he slots up over more in more of a traditional off-ball linebacker spot. So I'm expecting him to be on the field quite a bit. Maybe not 100% of the time. I do think Kobe Bryant, at least for the start of the season, will maintain a solid starting role. Now that may change depending on injuries or just game script or whatever. But there was also some talk of moving Kobe Bryant to corner if they continue to struggle on the outsides. I believe he was a converted corner that kind of moved into that safety nickel area. So that's all another possibility that would see Evan Warriors stay on the field more too. So basically what I'm saying is they've got spots figured out for this kid everywhere on the field to keep him on the field. Sounds like they want him on the field and they're going to deploy him.
I think everywhere but defensive tackle right now.
Pretty
or nose
much.
guard.
yeah. Don't put him directly over the center.
Well, I ended up making my case for him when we were talking about Julian Love earlier, but just one other thing I like to point out is that the Seahawks traded up
Right.
to get him. And when you have a rookie that you're trading up early in the second round to go and grab, that means they really want him and they're really going to end up using him and so forth. So that's just another thing. And by the way, he was my number one IDP for safety as well. Had a couple others, in fact, in front of Starks. I can't remember off the top of my head. Kevin Winston, Tennessee, was one of those that I had ahead of him as well. And because I think Starks, particularly after our Darius Washington injury, there, which I think bodes well for Kyle Hamilton. And we, and part of the reason I think we probably left it both in top 24 is I think Starks plays that deeper role because he can communicate, which was part of the problem with the Ravens defense while they put Hamilton back there, allowing Hamilton to move closer to the line. So quick Ravens tangent for a second. We didn't talk about Kyle Hamilton in terms of us leaving him on the list, but that's one of the reasons why, which doesn't bode well for Starks in that deep IDP safety role.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, guess we have one more we wanted to talk about, right, Sean?
Yeah, well, let's go one more. This guy, he's had his first 2 years were pretty good, over 100 tackles each year, shows some big play abilities, and was off to a good start last year and got injured, which kept him off this list. Tell us a little more about Jaquan Brisker.
Jaquan Brisker, you hit some of the key stats about him. The one thing that is the only worry I have about him in returning to the top 24 was that bad concussion that he had last year. That happened, I believe, was what week 5 or week 6, and then he was inactive. Then he was inactive. He was inactive. It's like, okay, guys, at some point, put him on the injured reserve list. They finally, as the year, they finally gave up and put him on the injured reserve list after he missed all those games. But everything points to he's doing really well. I feel comfortable that in the Dennis Allen system that he can still be productive from a safety perspective. And so I have no problem, particularly with his tackling ability, of Brisker moving back into the top 24. And I think he'll get blitzed periodically from that safety spot, and I think he'll get a sack or two off of that as well.
Yeah, and the linebackers and some of those defensive linemen are getting a little older too. So a little older, a little slower. Maybe they're not as quick to the ball. So, and he will come in and clean that up behind them. Concussions, head injuries can be scary, and the way they treated him last year was troubling. I'd say, we've seen some of these guys come back from concussions really quick, and then some of them take a while. Is he going to be the same player or not? There is a little bit of hesitation there, but we've seen his floor. It's very solid, and if he's passing all the checks with the neurologist and things, we really shouldn't be scared to put him in our lineups.
Now, I do want to clarify one thing you said. You said it was troubling how they handled it. I just want to clarify that for the audience. I think what you were referring to is it's troubling that he missed so many games and was injured and so forth. Just to clarify, right? Yeah,
right. I didn't
mean they handled it right from the standpoint of holding him out.
Yeah, it was troubling for how long he got drug out before they just kind of held him out. Not like my Dolphins throw Tua right in there after a concussion. That's troubling.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with you on that. Now, we weren't necessarily planning on talking about this gentleman, but let's go ahead and just mention him. Ifeatu Melifonwu for Dolphins, since you brought up Miami and so forth. The Dolphins lost Poyer. That no one he was getting up in age. They signed him for a year as expected. That was probably his last hurrah. No one signed him yet. Javon Holland they lost in free agency to the Giants, which I think bodes well for Nubin. And we both left Nubin on the top 24 list. But the Dolphins safety, you got Melifonwu. They signed Ashton Davis. They don't really have much of anything else right now. So both you and I independently, once again, put Melifonwu on the list. For me, it was in that limited playing time he got when he was healthy, and he has had some injury problems. But when he's been healthy, and Detroit used him as a blitzer and up in the box, he was making tackles, he was making sacks, he had some interceptions, but he was behind Branch, he was behind Kirby Joseph, and he had the injuries. But if he can stay healthy, I think he has a good opportunity in Miami. Anything you add to that, Sean?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. In the flashes we've seen in Detroit, he looked phenomenal. Tackles, blitz, and interceptions. I mean that's everything we want. If we can get all those stats, I mean that's a clear cut path to the top 24. There's not a lot of big names on this Miami defense either. They're rebuilding the defensive line, edge rushers. Can they be healthy or not? The defense in general is shaky at best. There's talks of shipping Jalen Ramsey out. That whole secondary isn't solid at all. And for a team that will most likely probably be in some close games, if not trailing, they should be on the field plenty. So, yeah,
Alrighty.
there's nothing else in his way.
Alrighty. So that concludes safeties, and that concludes the the five true IDP positions. But we're going to preview the offense starting with quarterbacks here coming up in a second. But before I do, I just want to put a quick plug in for thefantasyfootballexpo.com. The Fantasy Football Expo being held in Canton, Ohio, the home of the NFL Hall of Fame, August 8th through 10th, 2025. Right around the corner, less than 2 months away. So many great people in the industry, folks, from people that you see on Twitter, people you see on SiriusXM or here on SiriusXM, others that you see on TV and so forth periodically. A lot of those folks are in person, plus a lot of other people in the industry across many of the other sites as well. And it's a great, great, great community as well. A lot of friendly people, not to mention all the fans that come out that you get to meet and all. A lot of fun. You've got on Friday night, you have the Friday night party that includes, oh crap, the tossing
Cornhole.
game. Cornhole. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe I drew a blank. I wanted to call it toss across. um, and the poker tournament on Friday. On Saturday, there's draft night out. There's also the expert league drafts that you can kind of sit in the back and watch, including the Kings Classic Butkus division, which I get to be a part of. And so I'd love to meet many of you all there if y'all come. So anyway, go to the fantasyfootballexpo.com, sign up, come and meet us, and enjoy a great time with a lot of great people. Now, with that, so we completed the defense, as I was saying. We're going to move into offense next week. And Sean, I know I sent you the list a little bit here in advance prior to the show here. These are the top 24. Didn't talk about it earlier in the show, but the repeat rates for quarterbacks, 7 of the top 12 repeat from quarterbacks, 18 of the top 24. Now, there's a lot of variation that sometimes happens in between that, such as Patrick Mahomes, for example. But a lot more consistency. So next week we'll be talking about the 6 that we're going to take out, and we might talk a little bit more for our audience about who we think will move into the top 12 and fall out of the top 12 kind of thing as well. So Sean, when you look at this list, I remember what you originally typed me. You want to tell what the audience you originally typed and then you changed your mind on?
Yeah, I thought, hey, it should be easy to knock off 6 of these guys pretty quick, and then when you get into some of these old guys, that's where it gets kind of tricky. You're like, they've been good before, still kind of are. None of these lists have been easy, if I'm being honest.
Exactly right. If it was easy, fantasy football would be easy in terms of figuring out who's going to perform, better in the coming year versus who won't, kind of thing. But that's what makes fantasy football so fun and challenging, is figuring that out. So what we'll be doing, folks, is we will be going through quarterbacks next week, and we'll probably spend a little bit more time up front as well, talking about the running back, wide receiver, and tight end repeat rates, just to ground everybody a little bit on those as we get ready for some of those future shows as well. So, Sean, as we're wrapping up the show here today, any kind of closing thoughts or comments related to today's show that you wanted to share with the audience by chance?
Oh man, this has been really fun. It's been a great exercise. I love IDP, so going deeper and really understanding the rates that these guys do repeat and how many do not repeat. We're not just making stuff up here. This is factual data, and the odds say that we have to take some of these guys off this list, even though these 24 might be our top 24 rankings. It says there it's not going to happen, no matter how much we'd like. So, just remember this was a top 24 in general, and these weren't actual rankings. We're not saying Nick Cross is the third overall guy next year or anything. They're just general. So when we say, Wanya Thomas is our 11th guy on the list, that doesn't mean he's going to be 11th overall next year. It's just
that he will pop into the top 24. That is correct. That is correct. We'll get into rankings much closer to the season as we get into training camp and so forth. But for now, we wanted to kind of get people thinking about who might jump to the top 24, particularly maybe there's some dynasty startups going on. Maybe for some rookie drafts and dynasty, and some of the ones that we've hit on and talked about. So anyway, great call out, Sean, to remind folks about this is just the top 24, not necessarily the order per se that we see them coming up. Okay, great. All right, with that, we're going to call this a wrap, folks. If you like this show, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and please subscribe to the channel as well. If you have comments, suggestions, please add those on YouTube channel. As I talked about last week, we had someone from Switzerland, which was great to hear from. We have any international folks, love to hear from, not only for folks in the United States here, but if international, let us know if you're international. We'll give you a shout out on here as well. Give me a follow at Ricky Rod 66 and Sean at Sean 8386 on X. Boy, I couldn't spit that out. And of course, as I talked about earlier in the show, you can catch this show, a replay of it, as well as all our previous shows on the IDP Plus YouTube channel. So, and on Spotify as well. I keep on forgetting to talk about Spotify, but you can also check it out on Spotify as well. All right, with that, we'll see you in about another week or so on quarterbacks. On behalf of Sean Teague, this is Ricky Rodrigue wishing you and your family and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another. And we're out of here, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.